So Firehose is going to want you to use this thing called Rspec.
Okay.
And I don't even know what Rspec stands for, but a spec is generally shorthand for like a specification,
Okay.
which is shorthand, or what sometimes that's what people say. That's like I'm specifying that this product will behave in this way. These are the
Okay.
specs. So like, you might have a client, or you might be a client, and because you're building something for yourself, and one of your specs is like, I want people to be able to create an account if they supply an email and a password. So that's a spec. And our spec is like a framework that has a particular kind of language that you use. It's actually just Ruby, but
Okay.
maybe that's what the R in our spec stands for. It probably does. It's just Ruby, but it's not going to look like Ruby. But basically, it's like a language where you define your specs or your requirements, and you kind of set up conditions to verify that those requirements are satisfied by your code. So that's a
Okay.
spec. So for an example, you might build a class, and the class might have a method that counts the number of clouds in the sky or something. And so you set up a spec to create a fake sky with 5 clouds, and then you run your class and you say the answer should be 5, and it is, and you're like, great, my class works. That's what a spec is. Now, it's not going to make sense until we do a little bit of it, but
Okay.
basically, tests are code that are cre- tests is that's it's code in your project that is making sure that the production code in your project that's going to be running is doing what it is supposed to do. So
Okay.
the code in your tests doesn't get run when your product is out there in the world running. The code in your tests only exists to verify the correctness of your actual product code.
Okay.
Anyway, so we'll learn by
So
doing.
so you can so you would write the test, and so it would not work in your production environment, or
No, no,
it
no.
would, but it's essentially just making sure that the code you have written for said test works, basically. Is that what it is?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll show you how it works. So I'm going to come in here, and in this development test group in the gem file, this is the same sandbox we were using the other day when we were talking about cats and dogs. So I'm going to put this RSpec gem in here, which is what Firehose is going to ask you to do, and we'll just make sure that it's the latest version. And now let me see if I can bundle install that. Yeah, so it's in there, and then we'll do. Once you install RSpec, you have to generate these helpers like this. This is all in the GitHub. I think
Okay.
it's RSpec install. I think so. And it'll generate some files. One is called Spec Helper. One's probably called Rails Helper. There they are. And those files are. Here we can look at one. They're full of ways that there's all kinds of stuff you can do to affect how these tests are run. It's all commented out. And then
Okay.
the Rails helper, basically the Rails helper is going to load Rails in the background. So don't get freaked out by this stuff. It's scary
Okay.
looking. All right. So like if you want to write a test, once you run RSpec, you're going to have this new folder in your Rails project. Do you see it there?
Mm-hmm.
It's called
Yep.
Spec, and all your tests live here. And so this folder has some correlation to what's in your app folder, slightly. All right. So, for example, of course, we already had 2 models, the cat and the dog model. So I'm just going to forget about those for now. But like, let's say you wanted to make a new model, and let's just make a model for a car.
Okay.
All right. So how would we do that? Rails generate model
Rails
car.
car.
Yeah, and then the car will have like a make, and I don't know if we can use the word model, if that's a reserved word or not. Anyway, we'll try. Model. Let's not do it. Make, and we'll say manufacturer. I hate that word. And then, the year,
Yeah. Okay.
year, and that's an integer. Okay, so that's the model. Now watch, see what's happening here. This is a little different. It made the migration to create your cars table, and it made the model class. You see that? But what else did it make?
Yep. Yeah, it also made a file in the Rspec.
Yeah, and it does that because we installed Rspec. So from here on out, when you generate a model or you generate a controller or even like there's other things like a view, which I don't think you do much of that. It'll generate these little corresponding spec files that manage the test for that thing.
Okay.
And you can see how it's in the spec/models folder and the class is in the app models folder.
Yep.
So they totally line up. So now in here you have car spec, and in here you got car. Now the difference is this isn't called car.rb, it's called carspec.rb. So all spec files have to end in spec, otherwise they're not going to be run by Rspec. When you ask Rspec, when you tell Rspec to run your tests, it's only going to run files that end in spec.
Okay.
Because you can make your own and you can call them whatever you want as long as they end in spec.
Okay.
So here's our car class. Looks the same as all the others, right? There's nothing in there. And then here's our spec class. And it's got this line pending. It means there's nothing going on here. It says add some examples. So I'll delete this. All right. So here we are. This is a spec file that is going to describe the behavior of a car. Okay?
Okay.
Now, usually when you write tests, once you get pretty good at it, you're going to want to do this thing called TDD, which is test-driven development. And what that means is that before you put code in your class here to do stuff, you're going to put code here to describe that behavior.
Okay.
Are you okay? You doing okay over there?
Yeah. So it is.
It's a lot to absorb, but that's what we're recording.
So basically, it's a precursor to building thing in your class. You'd want to basically.
Like when I work on stuff, what I do is I build if I want a new class, the first thing I'll do is I'll come down here and say, well, and I'll just make I'll make the spec file and it'll look like this, and then I'll basically run my test here. So let's do this. I'm gonna. Well, anyway. So if we want to run this test, let's do that. So here we are back at the command line. Okay, I'm in your project. So the way you run a test is you type rspec and then the name of your spec file. Okay. So it's in spec/model/car spec. There it is. Now watch what happens. Ta-da! Oh, what's it saying? Web console's activated in the test environment. What have I done? Something wrong. Move it to the development group of your gem file. Well, I certainly will. Where is it? Oh, somehow it's in here. We want to just put it, okay. Okay. Did that work? Yes, it did. Okay. Now we're on there. Now we're on our spec, and that error shouldn't come back. Slow. Oh, okay. So the test didn't work because we have migrations that we need to run.
Okay.
So remember, because we created that car class.
Yeah, that's right.
So this may have solved it. Yeah. Oh no. Now I got to run the test. Here we go.
Okay.
Now, what do you take away from that?
I take away that there's nothing in there because they didn't find anything.
That's
There's
right.
0 examples, and because of that, nothing failed.
That's right. An example is like it's like a test. It's one of the tests that you're going to put in that file.
Okay.
One of the irritating things is they use, is like, is it a spec or a test or an example or what? And it's like, well, we'll just use all the words interchangeably and
It's
hope
all
that,
the above.
yeah. But you see how it's green? I don't know if it is green on your screen, but
Yeah, it
it
is.
comes
Yeah.
back green, and that sometimes people talk about going from red to green, and that's what they mean. If it failed,
Okay.
you'd see red text there. But anyway, let's put a test in here, okay?
Okay.
And so the first test will say, let's pretend like when you create a car, I mean, even though when we go look at the class, there's nothing here, we happen to know when we go look at our schema that our car can hold the make, manufacturer, and year, right? Because
Yep.
sometimes if you want to know about your model, you just go to the schema and then you can learn all about it. All right?
Yep.
This is a file called schema.rb. Anyway, so we happen to know that. So what if we wanted to have a method and we want the method to be like, something like this? Like we want to be able to ask a car if it's old. And if the car is more than 20 years old, it'll say true. And if it's less than 20 years old, it'll say false. Okay?
Okay.
And we can, so the car will look at itself, look at its year, and say, yes, I'm old, or no, I'm not old. Do you kind of get what I'm going at there?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, now let's write that method here. What I put here?
Would you have to say something like if year is greater than whatever?
We can be sloppy. And we'll even hard code the year. Like, don't worry about that stuff. We don't need to
Okay.
check the current date. Or anything.
Let's see. Then would you just want like, yeah, false, true? Okay.
So if it's 1998 or later, we're not old. If it's 1997 or below, we are old, right?
Old.
We're old. That would be true. Now, one nice way to say this is, you can just do that. This is a real.
Okay. Okay, because it'll. So okay, because if it run, it will be true. Otherwise, if not, it'll be false, right?
Well, because the last line in a method is what's going to be returned. So this is just one expression, and the expression is the year less than 1998? And if it is, then this line will return true. And if it isn't, it'll return false.
Okay.
Now, I have no problem just leaving this here for now because it just makes things a little more clear. It's no problem. Anyway, so we would write this and we might kind of look at it and go, yeah, that's accurate or whatever, okay? But in test-driven development, you don't do that. So I'm going to comment this out, all right?
Okay.
Because this is how you would do it without TDD. But in TDD, you actually would put an example in here. And so the examples take the form of something like this. You use this word it, and you say it returns true. Okay, I'll say, we're going to refactor this a little bit, but I'll say old returns true if the car is older than, if the car year is older than 1998, right?
Okay.
And then I'll put do here and end. And that is the form of an example right here.
Okay.
And so what goes in here is your actual test. And what's out here is like the description.
Okay.
And when you run your tests, Rspec, you can configure Rspec to kind of print out these little descriptions of each test so that you know which test is running. Anyway, all right. So it's a little confusing, right?
It is just a little.
All right. But anyway, this is the description. So in the test, now we're going to do this. We're going to make a car. We're going to say, all right, give me a car, and its year is going to be new, Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And let's run our test. Let's just see what happens when we run our test right now. And one example, 0 failures. Okay, so it found the example, but there's no failure. Well, the funny thing is, there's no real testing going on. I'm just like creating this car and assigning its year. Anyway, so I got my car, I got my year, and now the way Rspec works is the way that you verify your expectation is you use this thing called expect. And so I'm like, all right, I expect car dot old to equal true. Actually, I got this whole thing wrong. Let me do false. There's newer. Here we go. This is the wrong test. So I'm making a car that's not old, and I expect car dot old to return false.
Okay, so yeah, because you just told it now what it should do, right? As to where a minute ago we didn't.
Well, the testing, when you set up a test, you kind of have two sections. You have like the setup phase, and then you have your expectation, or where you check your results phase.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
So all you're doing here is you're saying I got to test this method on this car. So I got to test the old method. So for sure, for me to run that method at all, I have to have an object. I have to have a car object. Otherwise, I can't even run the method.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's what you're doing here. You're like, I got to make a new car. And then here, you're like, okay, and this car is going to be new, and that way I can test to see if old returns false. If you don't put anything here, well, you can't have any expectation about the old method because you don't know anything about the car. So so we're making this a new car, and so old should be false. And so watch what happens when we run this test. It'll fail, and it'll fail with an error that actually is going to drive development, and that's the thought behind TDD. It's test-driven development. So what's the error here?
Let's see. It expected it to be false, but it was not, because in the Rspec folder, whatever's on line 9 was probably the new. Was that the new car we created with the year?
Yeah, but what's on the line above it? See, what's the real error? It's
so the method old for car.
Right. It's saying no method error. It's saying you're calling this old method on this car object. Like it sees the car object we created. See, it's there.
Yep.
It's like, okay, I got your car object, and you're calling old on it, but old isn't defined. And then we go, oh yeah, it's not defined.
Okay, yeah, we commented it out
because we didn't define it. So let's delete this and let's define it. Right now, it's very tempting here to fill in all the logic, but let's not do that. Let's let the test drive us forward. Ready?
Okay.
So all we'll do is create the method, because in TDD, now you can get really religious about this and be like a zealot for it. We're not going to do that, but just to kind of show you the principle here. So let me run our test again, and there'll be a different failure, and that failure will drive us forward. Now what's this failure?
So failures, where are we at here?
So you got your expectation there, where it's like, we expect car.old to equal false.
Yes.
And it says, well,
There we go. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't see all the screen. I had to scroll down.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. So expected false got nil.
All right. So that kind of makes sense, because it's like, well, this method's got nothing in it, so it's going to return nil, right? And an empty method's going to return nil. So basically all that error is saying is, hello, your method doesn't do jack, so you need to put something in there. This is a very common failure. Eventually, the more you use Rspec, you'll be like, oh yeah, my method's empty. So like if you just want to make the test pass, we can just kind of game it and just say false. And let's do that. Let's just make the test pass, even though, now watch. This will make us all feel good inside. Green, tasty,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, oh, look at my test, they're all passing. And that's fine. Let's just leave it there for now, but let's write another test, okay?
Okay.
Because we know that this is obviously not going to stand. But let's go back here to the this test, because we can write another test here that say old needs to return true if the car is
older.
Yeah, is older than
1998.
is older than 19. Well, older or equal to 1998, right?
Okay.
So if it's 1998 or older, we want it to be old. And so now we'll create what do I need to do here for this test? Let's see if you can drive me.
Oh goodness. So we need to create another new car.
There it is.
And we need to expected car. This one should be true.
Right. Except this car is identical to the one above, and it shouldn't be.
Do we need
Right?
to change the year on it?
Yeah. So
Create a new car basically with a new year.
yep. So we need to make this car, really old, like one of the original Model Ts. Okay. Is that when the Model T came out? That can't be right.
Around then.
It seems kind of, yeah, I think it was around then. Anyways, it's something. Maybe it's Chariot. Anyways, that's a car. So now we're going to run our tests again, and one will pass and one will fail, right? Because that method's always returning false, which is
Okay.
So you can kind of see right below the line where I ran the test. See, there's that one little green dot. That's the passing test.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
And then there's an F. And so when you have a ton of tests, that line will stretch all the way across, and it'll be like ton of green dots, and then you'll get some Fs, and you'll be like, shoot, I got to fix that. All right, so
that green dot and the red F, is that going almost like test by test? Is that saying that
Yep.
first one passed, second one failed?
yep, and it runs them really fast. I mean, a good test suite. I mean, I've seen some bad ones that run for like 15 minutes, but a good one will run in under a minute. You can,
Okay.
and when you're just the project's the size that you're doing, your test should never run for more than. You could probably run all your tests in under 10 seconds. I would think.
Okay.
So that's good, because when they run that fast, you'll run them often.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're getting a lot of good help here. One is, it's telling you exactly what line to go to diagnose this, right? Do you see that there where it says car spec line 16?
Yep.
All right, so let's go there. I mean, we know exactly where to go. It's this test. We
Yep.
expect Carl to be true, but all right, so we need to go here, and we're like, all right. If the year, I'll say self.year to make it a little clearer. If self.year is greater than
Less than
1998, then I'm not old, right? Otherwise, I am old, and that's the end of my method. I would normally shorten that into that one line, but it's fine if this is.
Yep.
Okay, so now we run our tests again. Ta-da!
Oh, hey, look at there.
And what
Look at
that and what that means is like you've come up with an aspect of your software that you want to exist, and rather than just jumping in here and kind of coding it and looking at it, you have verified that you wrote tests to make sure it works that way.
Okay.
And you might have you might have other conditions like, well, what should it return if the car has no year? If there's no year in the car. But anyway, we don't want to go there right now. Okay, so usually in Rspec, these things are called examples, these things between the it blocks.
Okay.
And so what Rspec lets you do is it lets you kind of group them together. And so, you have what are called describe blocks. This is one out here. And your if blocks are inside these describe blocks. But anyway, you can have as many describe blocks as you want. And one kind of nice thing to do is if you have like 2 or 3 tests that are testing the same method or the same concept, you would just put that in a describe block and say, instance method old. We're kind of a convention if it's an instance method is just to do that.
Okay.
But anyway, let's just say, instance method old, and then you have to put a do here, and then what we'll do is we'll indent this, and we'll close it off. And now I don't need to put old here. I'll just put this because these if blocks are inside this describe block. So that's how you kind of group stuff when you're testing stuff.
Okay.
Now think about this. Imagine that you're working on a project and you're working with just 2 other guys on it. And every day, multiple times a day, you're pushing up your code or pulling down the code, and everybody's making changes. Everybody's fingerprints are everywhere. Now, it's easy to see how somebody would be changing something, changing the name of a column or changing the way the logic works, and it would interfere inadvertently, unknown to anyone, with your code, right? I mean, it's just too many moving parts. So especially when you're working on bigger projects with teams, having tests behind everything is a huge safeguard. Because what happens is, you'll pull it down, you'll pull down the code, you'll run all the tests, and they'll all be green, hopefully, because hopefully you don't have code up on the master branch with failing tests. That would be, that's a little bit insane to have that. So you pull it down, all the tests are green. And then you make a branch and you code out your feature that you're working on. And then when you're done, you run all the tests again. Oh, and by the way, the new stuff that you added is also driven by some tests. Its behavior is verified through testing.
Yeah.
So then when you're done, you go through and you run it, and then like some tests that are totally unrelated to your section that you were working on, you thought they fail. And you're like, holy cow, when I changed this model, I broke this thing that actually depended on that way over here. And you're like, man, I'm so glad the test was verifying that behavior. And then you go and you can fix it. You either change the test or you know what I mean? You just make sure that everything's good.
Absolutely.
So if you don't, anyway, so that's, sometimes people would make the case like, man, writing tests is, it's like double the work, it slows you down, and there is some truth to that, but not,
But it saved you in the long run, so that way if you ever did, make a change, pushed it to production, and then it caused things to break. Well, if you had your tests in place and you ran them, you would have known that beforehand, and you could have taken care of that issue.
That's right. And it's kind of like, if I'm writing some Ruby software to manage my recipe collection out by the grill, it's like the stakes are so low that, maybe I wouldn't write any tests, because if it breaks, the only sad person is me and maybe my kids. It's like no big deal. But if you're writing like bank software or anything that people are using, it's really irresponsible to not. I mean, I know that you have to cut corners sometimes. You just have to. But to not care about it, or to say that, it's twice the work. When someone starts talking that way, I'm just like, I don't know how much real work you've done to talk that way. I just don't understand that.
Right. I was going to say, so that should be, I was going to ask, should that be standard practice? But, it should be.
Well,
if you're running something big, for instance, like where we're running a huge multi-million-dollar e-commerce, like we should have that. We should have those fundamentals in place, right?
Yeah.
That should just be standard practice for a new developer coming on. That's what we do here.
It seems, and I think, I don't know if it's even most, but a lot of places are like that.
Okay.
There's an art to writing tests. Sometimes you write them, you can write fast tests, and you can also write tests that are really slow. One thing that you can write, like the easiest kind of test to write, is feature tests, which are not. They're much slower, but they're much easier to write. Maybe we could do. Yeah, we could do one real quick. Yeah. Okay. Let's do that because you'll find it cool. So let me see here. I have to install this thing called capybara, which is like a. They don't call it feature test anymore. They call it acceptance testing.
Okay.
Takes a little. Sometimes it takes a minute to set up. How do I do this? Okay, hold on. I think when they get you started on tests in with Firehose, they got you on controller tests, which are great. Or maybe they're called request tests now. Everyone's always changing their names. Oops. Let me get capybara in there. And somewhere, put this in the Rails helper. The hard part is let's see if I can get this to work. The hard part sometimes with testing is just getting set up. It's a little frustrating. Yeah. It's intimidating, right? It's like, man, all this stuff I got to figure out.
No,
okay,
it is.
So I'm going to make this folder in my spec folder called feature. And so, like, let's say we have a test. We'll call it, user visits home page. Yeah. Spec.rp. All right. And so I just want to make sure I set everything up right. So I'm just going to do real quick. Say describe, user visits homepage. And what I have to do here is say that this is a feature test. And let's just see if I can run this test. It might break. Nope, it ran. That's amazing. Yep. And I think one thing I need to do is I need to require Rails helper. What that'll do is load Rails in the background.
Okay.
Let's see if it still works. Much slower. Still ran. All right. So that you're going to find this to be kind of cool. All right. So let's say that in your app you're like, when someone comes to my to my website, I want them to see a big link that says cats, and I want them to be able to click on it, and I want them to be able to see some cats. Okay.
Okay.
Or like, no. You're like, I want people to be able to click on cats and then create a cat. Or well, let's just start with the first one. Okay, so you're like, I want people to be able to visit my homepage. So this is what you can do with Capybara. This is a feature test. It's really cool. I can say visit root path. Oh no, I have to put this in a block. Something like whatever. It finds. Let's see. User groups homepage. I never know how to. This is so simple and it's hard to describe. It sees a cat's link. Anyway, so we're just going to visit the root path. Now watch, it's probably going to break. So I run the spec. Yeah. And it's like undefined
method for root path?
Well, it doesn't understand it, but let's just replace it with this.
Okay.
Okay. So you could pass an entire URL to visit if you wanted to. Yeah, and this is a good error.
Failed.
Yeah, it failed. And what it says is, it says there's no route for that. You don't have any route that matches root.
Yep.
And it's like, is that true? Well, let's go look at let's run rake routes and see. And if you look at rake routes, just like last time, we don't have we have routes for.
Oh yeah.
We have /cats and we have /cats IT, But that's all we got. So let's go look at routes. And so we go into the routes, and we're like, oh, we don't have route paths. So I can say route. Oh gosh, I always forget how to do this. How do you specify the route in?
Oh goodness.
Hold on a second.
Is it?
Rails
Is
routes.
I know it is different. I was looking at it the other day,
No,
actually.
it's usually like commented out. I'm just searching for it right now. Route. Where are you? Where are you? Using route. There it is. Okay, so let's say route. Cats. And no. Routes. Let's see here. No. I want to make a page. Like, how can I do this? You know that anything you put in public, you can refer to, right?
I did not know that.
Well, let's not do that. Let me think here. How do we want to do this? Yeah, I'll just go back to routes. Okay, so we'll say route is cats index. So when someone comes, the first thing we want them to see is a list of cats. All right? That's what route is. Did I lose you?
No. I got you.
All right. Okay, so now it's complaining about some stuff. Let's get all of our cat paths back and run the test again. Ta-da! Okay, it passed.
We're good.
Passed.
Okay.
Of course, again, if you go look at our test, there's no test here. Like all we did is send it to the home page, and then it fired up the index action on the cats controller. Mm-hmm. But at least we know it got that far. Okay.
Yep.
So now what I can say is this: I can say, all right, I expect that page to have the content, "Welcome to Alan's Catland," right? Because that's what I'm going to, or this is frustrating because I don't want to. I'll just do it right. I'll put an apostrophe in there. Okay, welcome to Alan's Catland. And now we run the test. So this is test-driven development, remember? So we run the test.
Yep.
And now it's like, I don't see anything there that says, I expected to find the text, welcome to Alan's Catland, but all I found was whatever. Now what is it? What is it finding? Well, let's go look. Here, I'm going to drag this. Am I not running the server anywhere? Hold on, let's run the server. Don't you dare complain. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to pull this over here. Can you see? Oh, let me share my screen here. Application window. Can you see that I'm sharing on the Google thing?
Ooh, there we go. Yep.
Okay, it's kind of messed up because we were goofing around in there. Let me clean it up real quick. Down here, it's got a bunch of junk. Okay, let's get out of there. And okay, so when you go to the cat listing, all it sees is listing cats, Shaggy Bill, show. Okay, so you can tell that the test, that's all it's seeing, right? When you look at the test output, there's no welcome to Alan's Catland. So how do we get this test to pass?
You can just go to that page and you just put text there that says that?
Yeah, we just go to the cats controller and the index view and
you just put anywhere?
Well,
somewhere?
Yeah, and in your test, you can be really specific about where it needs to find that text. Like you can say, it needs to be inside an H1 tag. You can do that. Now, to say have content is like, it can be anywhere and in any form. And actually, that's kind of a bad practice because it's so vague that sometimes the test will pass accidentally. But when you're
Right.
just getting started, don't sweat that stuff. So
Okay.
let's change this, and it'll say, welcome to Phil's Cat Lab. And then we'll run the test again, and let's see if it passes. And it's going to say, I still don't see welcome to Alan's Cat Lab. But you can see that it does see what I put there.
Yep.
Right?
Welcome to Phil's Cat Lab.
So let's change it to say what it should say. And now we run the test, and it should get green. Come on, man.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's cool because, but it's about to get a lot cooler, okay?
Okay.
Because you can drive behavior from feature tests that I can say, okay, not only do I want to see that message, I can say it clicks on a cat's name. Wait a minute, let me go look at that stuff. Oh, no. It clicks on, let's see here. It clicks on a cat's name to see more details about that cat. All right. So, now for this to work, now you have to consider, you have to set up this test. Now, one thing you should know is, pretty much in Rails, when you're writing these tests, every time you run a test, you're starting from a database that's totally blank. There's nothing in it at all. Okay. Now, you can cause stuff to persist between tests, but you want to kind of go on the presumption that everything that needs to be set up for your test, you have to do right there. So if we want to click on a cat's name and all that stuff, what do we have to do? We got to create a cat, right?
You got to create a cat, yeah.
We got to create a cat, and we got to give him a name. And so, sometimes I'll just run, just to see if I'm on the right track. I'll run this test even just as it sits here.
Okay.
Now, how do you run just this test and not all of them? Well, you got to see what line you're on. This test is line 10 through 14. So over here, when I run the test, if I can just put a colon and put any of the line numbers that correspond to that one example, it'll just run that one example.
Okay.
That way you can focus on just one thing until you get it right. Anyway, so it works. So I'm able to create a cat, and then what do I want to do? Let's put this stuff down here. I want to visit the page, and I want to expect the page to, we don't need to test this, but I want the page to have the name Zippy on it.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
okay.
And then it's going to get even more real because we're going to try to click on Zippy, and it's not going to work. Okay, so that test is running. I haven't lost you, have I, Alan? Almost, right?
No.
Okay. But the thing about this is this is kind of silly and funny and everything, but you can open up a capybara feature test like this, and you can say, I want to visit this page, and I want to see this, and then I want to click this, and then I want to see this, and then I want to click this, and then I want to see this, and it doesn't take that much to write that, but then those specs that you've put there, they're going to drive you to create all this stuff to make it work. Then those very same specs provide a safeguard so that down the road, if some bozo, and that bozo could be you, breaks things, your specs are going to fail. It'll be like, wait a minute, I created a cat and I don't see his name anymore. You would never notice that, but your test will notice it, and it'll save you. So that's the value of what we're doing. And the example's kind of dumb and silly, but I'll show you some real feature tests right before we end, and you can kind of see what it looks like in the real world. Anyway, so we expect the page to have content Zippy. Now we want to go further. We want to click on Zippy, and right now you can see in our listing the names are there, but they're not clickable. Right? Can you see that?
Right.
You got to click show and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I can't remember the exact syntax. Just click. Oh my gosh, it's my dog. Hold on one second. At least I can shut the door.
Be happy.
All right. All my kids are home from school for the summer.
Aha, school's out.
School's out, man, and I confiscate all their electronics, and then they dig up like legacy electronics. You know, they're like, you can't stop us.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, okay, click button. So I think I want to use this I think it's called click link. Anyway, let's do this. So testing is so much fun. Okay, so I'm like, I want to click a link called Zippy.
Yep.
And then, and then we want more stuff to happen beneath. But let's just run the test as it is now. Let's just see what it says, because it's going to fail in spectacular fashion. And just say, it usually gives you some pretty good information. Yeah.
Let's take a look here. So homepage clicks on a cat name to see more. Click link Zippy. Not there.
It's like there's no link Zippy. Now it's like
unable to find the link Zippy. Gotcha. Okay.
It's like the word Zippy is here. This is working, but this isn't working. And so then we're like, all right, well, maybe instead of linking to show, and I'm just going to link to the cat's name. So now instead of saying show, I'm going to put the cat's name there. So I'll delete that one column. I'll delete this column too, I guess. I don't even need this. I don't even want that thing there. Just forget it. Okay, so we'll just do, yeah. So let's go back here and refresh this cats listing and see what we're looking at here. Aha. So now you got clickable links for all your cats.
Hey, there we go. Yep.
Right, so our test probably will pass. I'm running it. I'm making you switch back and forth between screens, right? Sorry.
Yes. You're good. I'm following you.
All right. So look at that.
Okay,
So now that means, did I just boot you from Teammate?
No.
Okay,
I'm good.
So now in our spec, it's like we made a cat, we went to the home page, we looked for his name, we clicked on his link, and you can kind of go, if you wanted to, you could write a feature test that went all over your site and did a bajillion things.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea because then if it fails, it's kind of hard to track down. It's not that easy to track down what exactly the problem was. It's nicer to have very focused tests. So,
yeah,
you just kind of learn by doing it. You get a feel for it. But let's just say that, let's go look at the cat model real quick. And a cat has, the only detail a cat has is its name, that's fine. But let's just say that like the show page for a cat, let's just say at the very top it would say something like this. It would say, my name is, let me just copy this. My name is cat.name. That's like in huge letters at the top of the page. So let's go look at Shaggy. My name is Shaggy. See that there?
Yep.
So that's going to head up all the detail page on the cat. And so then we would just go back to our feature test. And now we're going to put another expectation here. Well, I want the page you're on now to have the content, my name is Zippy.
Okay.
So we're just kind of going through all these steps. Now let's run this test, which it'll probably pass. Yep,
Hey,
it passes. Now, of course, we have multiple expectations, so it's kind of sloppy, but just to show you what we're doing. Now, here's what's really cool is like, let's say we have another. I'm just going to put it in here like, okay, so this is home page. This is home page. Describe the home page. But what if I wanted to, I'll just put like, this is like cat management. And so this describe block is inside that block. And so another describe block that we're going to have is going to be like creating a cat, something like that.
Okay.
Now, so for this, we might start with this. I want to visit cats.new. Is that where it is? What was our rake routes? Oh gosh, rake routes. Cats/new. Yeah, that's right. You see that there in the routes?
Yep, I do.
All right. So I want to create and I'm just going to run this one test. It creates a cat from the cat form. All right. I did something wrong here. What have I done wrong? Oh, there we go.
In business.
Okay, so I'm just going to run this one test. It's on line 24.
Da-da-da-da.
Undefined method visit for, I have to do, I have to say type feature. This is the kind of thing that will trip you up when you're trying to do this. It's all these little syntactic requirements. Yep. But there is a big difference between a feature test and a unit test. Okay, so it's working. Okay, so I want to visit cats new. And this is kind of cool because really what I want to do is I want to fill in the form and click submit and verify that it created a cat. Now, can you write a test for that to verify that your forms work? Yes, you can. It's really easy. So watch this. So I can say, first of all, let's go to the form. Let me go here. Well, let me just go to the new cat form. It basically has one field.
Yep.
Name. That makes it really easy. And then it has a button that says create cat. All right, so check this out. Fill in name, I think it's like this, with Billy. Click button, create cat. Now let's see if the test runs. Now we're not verifying any behavior. We're just kind of seeing if it can just kind of go through those motions. Let's see if it complains. And yep, cat got created. And then we can say, well, okay, well let's do it the technically the correct way to do it would be like, okay, now we want to go back to, well, okay, hold on. When I create a cat, let's say I create a cat named Sally. I can click back. No, well, I could say, see this message here?
Yeah.
Cat was successfully created. If you're good enough, if you're happy with that as proof that the cat was created, you can say, page or whatever, expect page to have content. And that's not bad. Okay, let's run this test. And it's like, yeah, that content was there. Another way you can do it. Now, some purists would say, no, in feature tests you're not supposed to see. With feature tests, you're not supposed to know that a database exists. You're supposed to basically kind of say, no, I'm just like any other user. I'm just using the browser. I'm just reading text and clicking buttons. That actually is a pure feature test. So to reach through and look at a database table or something is bad form. But sometimes it's just easy. And
right.
And I do it. It just depends. Anyway, so this is an obvious thing you can do is you can say, cat.first, like this. I expect cat.first.name to equal Billy. not because there's only going to be one cat in the database.
Right.
Or if you really want to do it right, you can say cat dot where, oh gosh, something like expect cat dot where name Billy at first. Oh no. Expect cat dot where name Billy to to not be empty. Believe it or not, that's valid Rspec syntax. Anyway, let's see if that works. I think it's not to be empty. I think it'll take.
Hey, it passed.
So what we did there is we visited the new cat page. We actually created it, and then we looked into the database to see if he was there. Now, some people would say,
Yeah, okay, I get what we just created. Yeah.
Some people would say, shame on you. Don't do that. It's just up to you. You can also say like this. Well, I'm going to go back to the front page, and I'm going to see if that page has Billy on it. Because if he's real, he'll be on it. So I can get rid of this. And that's okay too. Let's try that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
The biggest mistake you can make with testing is it's almost like is to listen to everybody else telling you exactly how you need to do it. It's like, dude, get off my back. I'm gonna just do a little bit, and and you learn by doing it. Because the first tests that I wrote were extremely like I look at them now and I laugh, but they were. It's just what I was capable of, and now the stuff I do is much different.
Sure.
But it's kind of fun because then you sit down, like what I do now is if I have a new project, I come in here with Capybara and I basically kind of sketch out a roadmap of what I want the thing to do. And then these tests, sometimes, I'll be like, visit this thing and it'll say that path doesn't exist. And then I'm like, oh, that controller doesn't even exist. So I got to create the controller, and then it's like, and that route doesn't exist. Well, I got to create the method, and I got to create the view, and the test just drives.
Right. I'm starting to see that as to like I equate it to like in the other apps that we're building. You've got a wireframe, and then you just kind of like sit down and you just kind of like think about it. Well, yeah, you can still have a wireframe, but your first maybe some actions that you should do is create that.
Yeah,
and then that will you to then create the functions and everything that you need for the site that you're expecting.
Yeah. And if you're one of these people, and I am, where you accidentally start to obsess over things that aren't important, then writing software this way is a big salvation from that. Like, imagine if you have a browser up and you're refreshing the browser to verify all this stuff. Well, number one, it's not as fast. It just is not as fast eventually. And number two, you're going to be like, oh, I don't like the size of that font or something like that. Or like, this stuff should really be in a table. But actually, it's like that stuff can wait till the very end, and this hides it from you. You focus just on the functionality of it. And
then you go in and clean up the look and feel of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree because I'm kind of looking forward to this and trying this out because that's exactly what I will do is I'll go back, I'll refresh. Yeah, like you said, it's slow, and then my mind will wander from what I should be working on, exactly like you said, going, ooh, I don't quite like the spacing on that, or I don't quite like what that's doing. Let me go fix that really quick. And it's like, that could have waited until the very end. That's like the last thing I needed to do right now.
That's right. Now I'll show you, okay, so I hope I don't show you something that I shouldn't show you. Let me think here real quick. I'm opening up another window that won't be in the recording to make sure.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find something here. Are there feature tests in here? Let me see here. Yeah, okay, that's good enough. I mean, this isn't my best effort, but this is something I did a couple years ago. Let's find it for So this is software that I wrote for this like church registration thing. So
Okay.
I only have 3 spec files in here. So one is called edit attendees. And so if I click on here, is that right? Yeah, there's not that much here, but like it's like it should show the edit contact information page. Well, let's look at this one. It should list the current users, attendees, but not all of them. I don't know what that means. But anyway, I create a user, then I create
Yeah.
an attendee. Oh, see, I didn't describe it that well. Basically, I create an attendee that belongs to this user, and then one that doesn't. And then log in, and then I click on enter edit, and I say the page should have my user's name, and it should not have the other guy because he's not mine.
Gotcha. Yep.
And this,
Cool.
it should let me click on the last name and go to the edit attendee form, and so.
So, like, when you were doing this, did you build these tests first, and then as you were working through them, you then built out the site? Is that kind of the process?
Kind of. Sometimes it's like you get again, it's like in a perfect world, I think that's how it's supposed to work. What often happens is I'll have an idea of where I want to go, and so I will just maybe start coding something. But if I feel like this is the right direction, sometimes you just want to code a little bit to give it a tiny bit of shape.
Yeah, as I say, to get some bones, to get something there,
Yeah.
and then begin to work on it and fine tune it.
Yeah, but generally, as quick as I can, I would jump back into testing, and
Okay.
and because it's almost like sometimes you're just staring at a wall of code and you don't know what to do next. There's a lot of things you could do, and so you're kind of like, well, and it's helpful to have a test fail and say, I don't know what this link says go here, but that controller doesn't exist. Then I'm like, well, at least the controller needs to exist, so I'll make it. And then
Yeah.
and then it says the index method doesn't exist in that controller, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll do that. And then it'll say there's no view for the index method, and then I'm like, oh, I got to make that. And then it's like we're in the view, but there's nothing there. And it's somewhat comforting to be nudged step by step. You also know you're not doing extraneous work.
Right.
But like I said, this is a huge realm. There's a whole science to testing. There's a lot of religious zealotry around it. You just kind of got to find your own rhythm. But for sure you want to do it. You want to do it to some degree.
Right.
And you'll probably swing the needle too far. Like you'll over-test and then under-test, and then you just find something that works.
Yeah. Cool. Sweet.
All right, that's more than an hour. So are you...
No, that was plenty good. Thanks, and sorry for going on for that. That's cool. I'm looking forward to diving into it this week and learning.